Today's video does contain subject matter that some viewers may find sensitive, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Since my parents put me in Boy Scouts as a kid, I fell in love with anything outdoors, like camping and hiking. One thing I could never do, though, was hunt or fish. So, when I say the outdoors, that includes the wildlife, too. My dad tried to take me hunting once, and I cried. So, I could teach you how to live out in the wilderness on your own, but we'd be living on a vegetarian diet. Sorry. So anyways, as a kid, I would walk around our backyard as it ran along some trees, and I always had my own little adventure out there. As I got older, I would go to different parks and trails to challenge myself and learn more. I had a fair share of friends, but not many that were as hyped about hiking as I was. People start craving meat and Wi-Fi after a few days without it. So, I found myself going solo, but I was never quite alone. I always brought along my dog, Parker. And Parker was a lab, and I got him when he was just a puppy from a friend of my mom's. I worked hard with training him because I wanted to be able to take him with me on these trips and to be off leash for it too. I know there are some parks that require a leash, and I did still bring it, but if we were deep in the back where there were rarely any people, I let him off. He was very well behaved. He loved being able to run as fast as he could through the trees, jump into the water, and he wouldn't hurt anyone. There are plenty of kids that have stopped us before to pet him, and he would sit and just patiently wait until they were done. He wouldn't even growl when playing with me. He's always a blast to have tagging along on these adventures of mine. After I finished college, I wanted to go on a trip to some of the best hiking trails that I had found. This was going to take me through a couple of states, so I planned on it taking at least a month or so. We made it through 2 parks, and we had a great time, too. I made some friends that actually gave me their info, because they actually wanted to meet up and do this same thing. I got a few suggestions of places to add to my list as well, and overall, just had a good time. It was the third one that really messed up the whole mood of the trip. I don't want to give specifics for privacy reasons on a few sides, but I will say that it was in a western state. This park had a huge hiking trail that had campgrounds scattered around, as some people would stop and rest and continue on the next day. There was even an area for rock climbing instead of taking the path all the way around to the top. I loved rock climbing, but I rarely did it since I had Parker with me. My friends joked about me getting a harness to put him on my back, but I think with how heavy he is, that wouldn't have been possible or safe. So, we just enjoyed the scenery and would walk our way around. And the sun was starting to set, and I started noticing people setting up little camps, but I didn't want to be around others, so I tried to push forward some more to be a little more alone. It was getting dark at this point, but I got further up and I couldn't hear people anymore, so I decided to stop there. I set up my little tent, pulled out something to eat for myself and Parker. Don't worry, he wasn't a vegetarian, and I settled in for the night. Now, most of the time, I don't have trouble sleeping outdoors. The sound of just crickets or the wind was enough to knock me out, but for some reason, that night, I could not shake this feeling. I tossed and turned for a while, not seeming to be able to get comfortable. The bigger problem that I had with this, though, was that Parker was awake too. He was looking at one side of the tent, mouth closed with his head tilted. It was normal for us to have deer or raccoons walking around, so I figured that's what had caught his attention. But that also doesn't normally keep me awake. I decided to peek out there to see what it was, though, and maybe scare it off so we could both get some sleep. Parker was quick to run out of the tent, but there was nothing around, and not even a sign of anything. Nothing had been moved or touched. Parker had even seemed surprised when there was nothing there but us. So we went back to the tent and tried to sleep again, without much luck. I felt like I was being watched. Like the feeling you get when you know someone is behind you, looking over your shoulder. It was quite uncomfortable. I finally fell asleep at some point, probably because the exhaustion outweighed my paranoid mind, and I managed to sleep for a few hours. When we got up the next morning, we looked around our spot again, but saw no signs of anything entering. I just chalked it up to me being paranoid again and not sleeping very well, and told myself that I needed to drink more water. So, we packed up, and we moved on. As we got a few hours in, we started running into people that we hadn't seen before. I assumed they were probably there the night before, and it was at that point they were ahead of me, and they had stopped again for a break. They actually had a few kids with them, with probably enough strollers and harnesses for them not to be walking, but to me, that just seemed excessive. I felt that this was too far out of the way to take kids so young, where you don't know how they could even react to something out here. Not to mention how loud they were. I'm sorry. People that go to places like that and treat it like it's just a normal public park drive me crazy. Again, I liked being out here to escape civilization, and that stuff ruined it for me. So I tried to get ahead of them as quickly as I could, and get back to zoning out alone. It seemed like I'd finally gotten past the bulk of the people, as I hadn't seen anyone for a while, and probably wouldn't see many more at this point. Or at least none with kids, as the path became less visible and more just gravel. With the amount that I had left of the trail, I estimated that I could get close to the end, stay one more night, and then leave. That way, I didn't risk walking on the trail in the dark. As we climbed up the trail, though, I started feeling on edge again. The same way that I did the night before. So my first thought, again, was to look around for wildlife, but when I saw nothing, I became more on edge, wondering if there was someone hiding nearby. It wouldn't be the first time someone was robbed in a park like this. However, I don't take much with me of value other than my dog and a knife that my dad gave me. But people are still dangerous. So I started paying closer attention to my surroundings to make sure nothing caught me by surprise. After a few of not running into anyone or anything, I thought again I was just getting paranoid since I was so secluded. But that's when I started hearing someone crying. It sounded like a really small child. My first thought was I was actually going to run into someone with a baby up here. But when the trail flattened out and I didn't see anyone, it just added to the confusion. At this point, I was now racking my brain trying to figure out where the crying was coming from. It sounded like it was coming from the brush off the side of the trail. That kicked me into ranger mode, and I was worried someone may be lost or injured. So I broke off from the trail to go into the dense trees. Sure enough, the crying got louder. I marked my trail however I could by marking the trees, leaving the flags that I had with me, just things like that, so I could get back easily. The crying got louder, but I didn't find anyone. I stood in the middle of these trees looking around, trying to hone in better on where they were. Now, Parker had been beside me this whole time, and I could tell that he could hear the crying too by the way he stopped panting and cocked his head to the side. So, while I'm standing there, I look down at him to see him on all fours, just looking around. He wasn't sitting and waiting like he normally does when I stop. He looked ready to move. He did this typically when we were playing fetch, or he was impatiently waiting for me to tell him to follow or something. This also made me realize that it wasn't just me. So, I gave him the signal to lead the way, and immediately he was looking around, sniffing the ground, and was on a mission. He led me to a pile of dead leaves and branches that looked like it had been purposely put there, like someone was cleaning up and just left it there. But it's usual, at least it had been for me, to see something like this in a national park. And that kind of stuff is typically left alone unless it's close to the trail or something. But when Parker started digging around it, I did the same. I was horrified thinking of what I could find, but instead, all I found was a baby harness. It was one of those strap ones that you could wear on your back, but what was it doing out here? And where was the owner of said harness? At this point, I was holding on to the harness, looking to see if it had any kind of tag on it, like a suitcase or something. I don't have kids. I don't know how that works. And that's when I noticed the crying stopped. I looked around to see if anything changed, but still, there were no signs of any other people. I was thinking I needed to get back and call for help, because this could be more serious than it looked. But when I called for Parker to follow, he had the same stance and was looking around. I was curious what else he had, so I told him to take the lead again. This time he would stop and look around and whimper and then just keep moving. It was starting to worry me with how much he started whimpering, but he wouldn't stop to let me check him out to make sure he wasn't hurt or anything. Sadly, he was definitely on the right trail. He led me to a small ravine that dipped down on the other side of a small cliff. He ran past me to a tree that had fallen and was rotting, and when he got to the other side, he sat down by it and barked for me. When I walked over to the side that he was on, I found a woman face down in the mud. I immediately checked for a pulse, but by how cold she was, I knew that she wasn't alive. It was definitely tragic, and not something I would ever want to find on a trip like this, but what was more bizarre to me was that she wasn't dressed like she was hiking or camping. She had an office suit on. It was a nice skirt, one heel, and even a matching blazer. Why was she out here dressed like that? Shaken, I followed my path back to the trail and managed to make my way to one of the emergency systems they have along the trails, and waited on the side for someone to arrive. I led them down to where she was, gave my statement, and since it was just two people, I actually helped them move the tree some so they could get her out better. That's when I noticed that she was missing an arm. I think they could tell it was too much for me at that point, and they let me go. I started walking back up to the path and had to tell the cops what all I knew and how I found her. They actually asked me if Parker was a cadaver dog, and they were surprised when I said that he wasn't. I hadn't even thought about it until he mentioned it, like, his ability to find her was just phenomenal. I actually got a ride back with one of the rangers because, at that point, I wasn't really in the mood to finish my trip, let alone sleep there. I left them my information and went to a nearby hotel for the night. I called my parents and told them about what had happened, and they were asking if I was okay, and they also thought that what Parker did was amazing. So, that really took me out of the mood for the rest of my trip. I told myself as a kid and growing up that I wanted to help people and teach others to appreciate nature, but finding someone too late, it really takes a lot out of you. All I can say is that if you're interested in getting into serious backpacking and hiking, make sure you are prepared and that people know where you're going. I really don't think she was out there for fun, but still, it's important to know. And in case anyone was interested, I found a news article about her being found, but they had no information on who she was, but they did mention that she was a mother. So, that then made me question about the harness that I found, which I had given that to the police as well, and that was the last I ever heard of it. I'm still out hiking and camping even to this day with Parker by my side, but I still wonder sometimes where that crying was coming from, and where Parker's ability to find her had come from as well. There's been an ongoing joke between my friends and I that I attract the weirdest crap. When we go hiking, camping, or even when we just drive to some abandoned spot to drink, something strange always happens, and I'm typically the one involved in it. One of the craziest ones for me was when we went through this trail in Utah. The place we were going was pretty much just for sightseeing and the walk. They had some campgrounds scattered around, but we tended to get loud and stupid, so we would chill on the trail somewhere and have a good time. I know we weren't supposed to, but as long as we weren't being disruptive to others, and we picked up after ourselves, the rangers pretty much left us alone. I'd brought my girlfriend at the time, since a couple of my friends were bringing theirs along as well, but the difference was that my girl really wasn't into the whole sleeping outside thing. She was definitely a city girl, but she wanted to spend more time with me, so she tolerated it. So, we hiked up to a spot that we've been to before, and started unpacking some drinks and food to unwind. At this point, my girl Amy had enough of walking and was in a bad mood. The other girls tried to get her to lighten up and help her cool off, but it would only work so much. I appreciated them for trying, though. One thing that did get her to lighten up was the drinks. She would become a little extra after about 4. Around this time, she would get aggressive or mean, so I would have to calm her down. This ended up starting a fight between us, and she stormed off into the tent, telling me I wasn't allowed in. I didn't want to ruin the fun, so I told the rest of them I was going to go get some more sticks and stuff to add to the fire, and walked away to cool off. It was at least an idea to think about things and have some time to myself. That's when things started to get wild. As I mentioned, we'd been on this trail before, so I was at least aware of the area to some extent. And I had an idea of where I was going, but I didn't do much outside of it because I was typically having fun with my friends. So, I decided to climb up over this ledge and across the other side to see if I could spot the other side of the highway or something else across. It was pretty dark at this point, so I did bring a flashlight with me to light my way, but that was it. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, so I wasn't expecting to need anything more. As I was walking across, I noticed a faint light in the distance. It didn't look very far, and, better yet, it looked like it was on the same side as me, so I decided to go check it out. As I got closer, I noticed a dark arch around the light that made it look like it was some sort of small cavern. I thought, Hell yeah, something for me to explore real quick and maybe take everyone else to it, right? Once I reached it, I found the source of light, which was some old-looking lantern that had the fluid in it. It was flickering and looked low, so I don't know how long it had been on, but it was strange that it was just sitting there. I remember thinking to myself that it was like a porch light. Someone had left it on to get home. Then, I proceeded into the cavern. I had to duck down to get in, but then once inside, I could almost stand up straight. It was crazy. But then I got to looking around in there, and I scanned the area with my flashlight and saw some stuff on the ground. It looked like some kind of makeshift sleeping bag, or at least if it was one, it was so old and dirty and falling apart that it just looked like a couple of blankets. There were a few other items near it. The ones I remembered were a little hand mirror, a metal bowl that looked like kind of one for a dog, and some kind of book with writing all over the front. It looked more like a diary or sketchbook style rather than a book to read. I was scanning the area to see if there was anything else, but there wasn't much else to the room. There was a darker area in the back, but it looked like it was just a part where the wall jutted, so I'd ignored it. I was curious who could be staying here and if they'd been here long or had just arrived. If they were nearby or if the stuff was old, so I wanted to check out the book. I picked it up, and the first page had a dedication on it. It said something about everything they did was thanks to them. Then, flipping through, there was less and less writing and more scribbled notes and pictures. I went back to read one of the pages when I heard what sounded like someone gasping. It was loud enough that it made me jump up from the position that I was in. I looked over to where I heard the sound, which was by the dark back wall, and now there looked like a person was peeking around the wall. Like I said, it didn't look like there was anything past it, so I didn't expect a person to be there. So, thinking I had just interrupted whoever was there, I put my hands up, dropped the book, apologized for intruding. I didn't have the flashlight on them, other than when I initially heard the gasp, because I didn't want to blind them, so I had it down to my side. So, from what I could see, it looked like a person was either kneeling or was a small child, because their form was pretty short. I couldn't make out any details on the person, though. I told them I would leave and that I wasn't doing or planning on taking anything, and slowly walked backwards to leave. As I got closer to the entrance, something told me to put my light back on them. As I brought the flashlight up, so did the person. I watched as the shadow grew smoothly straight up with the head now tilted to the side. This meant this thing was over 6 foot tall, because it was taller than me, and I was about 5'8". The way it stood up was creepy and unnatural as hell, and I was ready to nope out of there. I quickly turned around and I ran out of there. I thought I would just run back to where my friends were, but I could hear something catching up to me. I swear, I felt like I was in some weird horror movie, like, it didn't feel weird. I got back to the ledge and I fell into it, and I stayed there for just a second, hoping I was either imagining it or that the person would lose me. As I sat there, I heard what sounded like someone running towards me and then just stop. Then they whispered, "Where are you?" Thankfully, they immediately ran back off, and I didn't move until I didn't hear the footsteps anymore. I pulled myself back over the ledge and made a mad dash back to my friends. When I got there, I was trying to explain to them what I just saw, and of course, they all thought I was just messing with them. Apparently, Amy was still awake, or had woken up and heard everything. I was hoping she wouldn't because I knew she would freak out, and she did, and now no longer wanted to stay there. It was way too dark for us to try to walk back out, and quite frankly, I wasn't comfortable with whatever or whoever that person was walking around. So I made up some BS about it being a joke to try and calm her down. We all finally went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I remember faking it a few times to avoid conversations with Amy, though. The next morning was a bit weird. We all tried to make light of the situation and joke around to at least have some last-minute fun. But I think we all just thought that it was more than a bit off. We left, and that was the last time Amy went with me until we split up. My friends were interested in the cave, though, so we actually went back out there the next week or so. It took us a while to find it, but thankfully we went during the day so that we could see better. The lantern that I saw was gone, but when we went in, the sleeping bag and the mirror were still there. But the bowl was gone, and the book looked like it had been caught on fire. We went back to where that person was standing, and to my surprise, it actually had more space back there than I expected. It didn't go anywhere, but it was almost like a closet, if there would have been like a door there. But back there was a pile of bones. I wouldn't call any of us that smart, so we couldn't tell what kind of bones they were, and if they were human or animal, but a couple of them were really long, like leg or arm bones. But of course, it would have made it easier, but there were no skulls. My friend thought it was weird, but joked about it and we left. There was no other sign of anyone being there. So yeah, I don't know what that was, but I assume it was a person since they talked, but nothing else about them really seemed human. I don't care for that trail anymore, but thankfully my friends still like me tagging along. I guess I'm just there to keep things interesting. Me and a friend of mine used to get together at least once a month and go hiking in one of the forests near us. We even made a few trips into the local national park because we wanted to get through all of the trails. The one by us has a few different paths in it, and that can take some time to get through, so we dedicated each trip to one path. However, that's also because we tend to divert off the trails so we can get away from the groups of people and tourists, and actually look around and enjoy the view. This event occurred one of the times we were going through that very park. We gathered our normal bag of gear that we took with us: water, a couple of snacks, a few emergency items like a small knife, first aid kit, things like that. And we met up at the park. I typically left my cell phone in my car because once we got deep into the trees, it was kind of worthless anyways. My friend Troy, though, always kept his on him, even though he always had the same result. So we got there and started heading to the last path that we hadn't tried before. This one was a bit more of an incline, so we found ourselves taking a few extra breaks on our way through. It was also towards the beginning of summer and was super humid that day, so I know that was probably part of it. We stopped and waited for people to pass and looked around to try and find a good place to divert from the path. We finally found one as we estimated where the lake would run, and decided we wanted to head towards that. We walked over by some trees, past a pile of dead branches and other debris, and were now no longer in view of said path. The trees provided some shade too, which did make it a little easier on us as well. I don't feel like it was long after this point that we ended up running into this guy. We were laughing and joking about something, and we were pretty loud about it, when I saw this guy just standing in front of the tree. I nudged my friend to get their attention, and they stopped and they looked at them with me. This guy didn't even look back at us, and the way he was dressed was even more bizarre to me. He had one of those thick, puffy jackets on, with some really dirty and ripped jeans. He also had some long hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in a while, as you could see the huge knot in the back of it. I didn't know what to do, so I just apologized for disrupting him, and when he still said nothing or looked over, I motioned for my friend to walk around him so we could keep going. As we did, I looked back to see his face, and I noticed that it looked just as dirty. But it was more the look on his face that confused me even more. He looked very cross, like he was trying to remember something, or was extremely angry about something. Curious to know if he was really mad or possibly injured or lost, I asked him if he was okay, and I didn't get a response. As my friend was telling me not to, I decided to approach him to, I guess, get a better look at him. Still, he didn't take his angry look off of the tree in front of him. When I got closer, I also noticed that the dirt on his face looked flaky, like it was dried blood. So I again asked him if he was okay or if he needed any help, but still nothing. My friend kept saying that we needed to go and that he was freaking him out, but part of me didn't feel right leaving him. So I pulled out my extra bottle of water and a bag of trail mix, and I set it next to the tree. As I started walking back, that's when I heard the guy mumbling something. So I turned back around thinking he was talking to me. He was just mumbling a bunch of nonsense, though, as I couldn't make out anything he was saying. So I just continued walking back to my friend when he did finally say something coherent. Not that it made much sense, though. He said, Tell me your secrets." I replied with, "I'm sorry, what?" Him, still staring at the tree, "He has secrets. Tell me your secrets." My friend was about ready to leave my ass at that point, so I just turned back and we made a brisk walk away from him. I looked back a few times and he never moved, so we carried on. After a little bit of time, we finally got through the trees, and we didn't quite make it to the lake, but did find a little offshoot stream of some sort. We sat there for a few, splashed water on our faces, and just kind of chilled for a bit. We noticed the orange and pink in the sky, and knew that we needed to start heading back, so we started making our way out. As we were walking, I was curious if that guy was still there so I could report it to someone to let them know, because that definitely was not normal, and he probably needed help. I know we took either the same path back, or pretty close to it based on the trail of flat grass and dirt that we left, so it wasn't hard to trace our way back. And we definitely found the guy, but he was far from okay. As we approached, it looked like he had his hands on the side of the tree, and we could hear grunts or mumbling as we got closer. Again, my friend stayed back while I got closer, and this guy was seriously smashing his head into the same tree repeatedly. There was blood all over his face, his hands, his chest. You could see the blood dripping on his shirt and coat, getting caked into his beard, and all over the ground in front of him. On top of this, he was now screaming, "Tell me why! Tell me why! What are you hiding?" Over and over with every smash. While this is happening, my friend is yelling behind me, "What the hell are you doing? Don't touch him. What is wrong with him?" And I'm just trying to figure out what the hell to do. If this guy didn't stop soon, he's going to cause some serious damage or even kill himself. I decided to basically pummel him, but it didn't even faze him. He started crawling back to the tree to keep going. I told my friend to run back to get help because I didn't want to leave him alone, but I wasn't going to be able to stop him and make him come with us. My friend didn't waste any time though, and he took off back towards the trails. I tried a few times pulling him away from the tree, but every time he would make his way back to it. With how many times I repeated this insane process, it seemed like my friend got back at record speed. Thankfully, he was accompanied by a park ranger who was able to subdue the man enough to get some ties on his wrists and get him to sit on the ground. From there, though, he just rocked back and forth sitting on the ground as he screamed and cried. Some police showed up too. We gave them our statement and had to try and convince them that we had nothing to do with him, except for trying to save his life. And then we were finally allowed to leave. We wanted to see what happened with the guy though, so we sat in my car and waited to see him come out. When they came down to the entrance, the guy was sitting in the back of one of the little trailers the ranger drove around in, and he looked out of it. I don't know what happened to him from that point on, though. The only other update we got was when a detective called me and asked if I had seen anyone else with him. And he mentioned that because they'd found other items indicating that there may have been someone with him at some point. I did tell them that I had left food and water for him, and I even mentioned the brand so they knew, and they said that that wasn't what they meant. They explained that they had found some clothing and a note. They wouldn't give more information than that, so I assumed it's probably important or serious, maybe, but I saw nothing else there. So, yeah, that was the last time that I saw that guy, obviously. And the last time I was ever approached about it, other than when my friend brought it up to remember or tell someone else about it. We did go back to that trail that same month. I think it was about 2 weeks after. We went so we could see if we could find anything else to tell us what had happened. The trail, of course, was different due to some new growth, but once we got around the general area, the tree was pretty easy to spot. The tree had bark missing, and there was a gouge in it. It was at the perfect height for someone to be smashing their head into it. It was eerie seeing it standing right where he was, racking my brain as to what was going on in his head. That was actually the last time we took that path. My friend thought it was too messed up to look at anymore, so we never went back. I know it's entirely possible the guy was just a little messed up and that there was nothing else to it other than he needed help, but that is just a scene that I can never get out of my head. So this was a collection of 3 creepy hiking horror stories, and hopefully it's a collection that you all enjoyed. I know I thought they were some very weird and interesting stories. The guy with the head bashing against the tree one, I'm really curious about that. I mean, like the original poster had said, it's entirely possible that he was just not all there, but I don't know. I feel like if I saw that personally, if I walked up to that scenario, I would think there was more to it. Just me thinking. The body, and then also the crying and the other one, that one was messed up. And then there's the person thing the other guy saw. All three of these stories were just absolutely fantastic and really make me want to not ever go out into the woods. Just saying. There was a time when I wanted to go to Yellowstone, and we did go to Yellowstone. We didn't get out, though, really, because car broke down, which was kind of terrifying. But I wanted to walk around. I wanted to. We never did. Never did. Maybe we'll go back someday. Who knows? Until then, I think I'll be hiking around my local park. That's just, it's more open, has a concrete path, and there are ducks. And damn, do I love ducks. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. And also, if you would, please leave me a comment down below, letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing. Not necessarily how the weather is. I asked you that on Wednesday. A lot of you guys responded, actually. Thank you for that. Maybe what your favorite flavor of soda is, if you drink soda. If you don't drink soda, well, I completely understand where you're coming from, but I don't know what else to say. So maybe your favorite flavor of soda from when you did drink soda, if you ever have. I don't know. I got nothing here, guys. It's Friday. I'm tired. I'm gonna go back to bed. And hopefully whenever I go back to bed, I will, sleep well.